Did you know that one of the most tragic love stories ever filmed was almost impossible to make? A Place in the Sun, released in 1951, tells the heartbreaking tale of a young man caught between two women and a terrible choice. But here's the strange part. The movie almost never happened because of Hollywood rules and real-life sadness. Behind the scenes, the cameras captured something so powerful that even the actors couldn't believe what they were filming. This classic movie still makes people cry today, and the secrets hidden in its making are just as dramatic as the story itself. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about A Place in the Sun. Number 20. The novel was written during a real murder trial. This movie was based on a novel called An American Tragedy, written by Theodore Dreiser in 1925. But here's the fascinating part. Dreiser wrote the book while a real murder trial was happening in America. A young man named Chester Gillette actually drowned his pregnant girlfriend in a lake, and he claimed it was an accident. Dreiser followed the trial in newspapers and used it as inspiration for his tragic story. The real event was so shocking and sad that it shook the entire nation. When Hollywood finally made this into a movie 26 years later, people still remembered the original crime. The author had turned real pain into art, and now the filmmakers were turning that art into cinema. What started as a newspaper headline became literature and then became immortal film. That wasn't just storytelling, that was capturing human tragedy in its rawest form. Number 19. Montgomery Clift prepared so hard. He nearly lost his mind. Montgomery Clift, the main actor, was known for doing something revolutionary: method acting. He didn't just pretend to be his character, he tried to become him completely. For A Place in the Sun, Clift studied the legal documents from the real murder trial. He read courtroom transcripts. He imagined the desperation, the fear, the impossible choices. The actor buried himself so deeply in the character's psychology that his friends became worried about him. He would stay in character even when cameras weren't rolling. Between takes, he wouldn't speak normally. He stayed silent and stared, thinking like a man awaiting execution. The director had to sometimes tell him to step out of character and breathe, to remember he was still Montgomery Clift, not a condemned prisoner. His dedication was beautiful, but it was also dangerous. It looked like powerful acting, but it was actually emotional survival. Number 18. Elizabeth Taylor was so young that her mother had to be on set. Elizabeth Taylor played Angela Vickers, the beautiful, wealthy girl who falls in love with the main character. At the time of filming, Taylor was only 18 years old. Because she was so young, Hollywood rules required her mother, Sarah Southern, to be present during every single day of shooting. Her mother wasn't just there for safety. She was required by law to watch and protect her daughter. This was unusual because Taylor was already famous and had been acting since childhood, but the studio system had strict rules about young actors. Taylor's mother would sit nearby, watching her famous daughter work with one of the most intense actors in Hollywood. It was like having a shadow follow you through the most important scenes of your career. What should have felt confining actually created a strange comfort on set. Her mother's presence kept the set respectful and protected during the film's most emotional and romantic scenes. Number 17. The lake where they filmed was freezing cold, and they used real water. The tragic boating scene, the moment that changes everything in the movie, was filmed in a real lake with real freezing water. Modern filmmakers would use tanks and special effects, but in 1951 they filmed the actual scene in an actual lake. The water was so cold that the actors and crew could barely stand it. Every take meant jumping into ice-cold water over and over again. The director wanted authenticity, and he got it. The actors' shaking wasn't pretend fear. Their bodies were genuinely suffering from the cold. Montgomery Clift's face, pale and trembling in the water, wasn't makeup or acting tricks. It was the real physical response of a human being experiencing shock and cold and horror all at once. The cameramen's hands were numb as they filmed. The boom operators holding microphones were shivering so badly they could barely keep the equipment steady. Everyone on set was miserable, but that misery translated into something unforgettable on screen. The suffering was real, so the emotion had to be real too. Number 16. Director George Stevens demanded 97 takes of one simple scene. George Stevens, the director, was a perfectionist. For one scene, just a simple conversation between two characters, he demanded 97 different takes. 97. The actors had to repeat the same dialogue, the same movements, the same emotions, 97 times. Montgomery Clift was exhausted. Elizabeth Taylor was frustrated. The crew was bewildered. Why would anyone need that many attempts to film one conversation? But Stevens wasn't being cruel. He was hunting for something invisible, a moment of truth that only appears when an actor stops thinking and starts feeling. He wanted the 98th take, or the 83rd, or the 41st, that magical moment when the performance becomes real. Sometimes it happens on the first try, but often it takes many, many attempts. The actors eventually understood that Stevens wasn't punishing them, he was protecting the art. He wanted their best, most honest moment captured forever. It looked like obsession, but it was love for the craft. Number 15. The costume designer created Elizabeth Taylor's dress without modern zippers. Elizabeth Taylor's famous white ball gown in the movie was designed by Edith Head, one of the greatest costume designers in Hollywood history. But here's the amazing detail. Edith Hand created the dress in a specific way because she knew the cameras would capture it in close-up. The dress had to look perfect from every angle, in every type of light. Edith used techniques that were almost forgotten even by 1951 standards. She hand-stitched details that a modern costume maker would use machines for. She chose fabrics based not just on how they looked, but on how they would move and shimmer on film. The dress had to tell a story: innocence, wealth, beauty, and a kind of fragility. When Elizabeth Taylor wore that gown, she wasn't just wearing clothes. She was wearing hope and danger sewn together. Every stitch was a decision. Every fold of fabric had purpose. What looked simple and elegant was actually incredibly complex craftsmanship. Behind the beauty was invisible, patient work. Top tip. Number 14. A real priest gave advice about the execution scene. The film's ending shows an execution scene. It's heartbreaking and controversial. To make it authentic and respectful, director George Stevens brought in a real Catholic priest to consult on set. The priest advised on what would actually happen during an execution in that era. He explained the religious rituals, the prayers, the way a condemned man might feel in his final hours. The priest wanted to make sure the scene treated this moment with dignity and truthfulness. This was unusual because many filmmakers wanted to sensationalize such a scene for drama. But Stevens wanted something different. He wanted respect and reality. The priest's guidance shaped how the actors performed and how the cameras captured the moment. It became a scene of profound sadness rather than excitement or shock. The presence of a real spiritual advisor transformed the entire tone. It wasn't just a movie moment, it was a genuine attempt to honor something sacred and terrible. That consultation changed everything about how audiences would feel. Number 13. Montgomery Clift and Shelley Winters had real chemistry because they didn't get along. Here's the strange truth. Montgomery Clift and Shelley Winters, who played Anne Raymond, the factory girl, didn't particularly like each other in real life. They were polite professionals, but they weren't friends. Yet their on-screen chemistry was explosive and heartbreaking. Their scenes together had a tension that felt absolutely authentic. Why? Because their subtle discomfort became the emotional foundation of their characters' relationship. The awkwardness they felt around each other translated into the awkwardness of their characters trying to connect across different social worlds. The distance between the actors became the distance between the characters. They were acting, of course, but that thin layer of real discomfort made everything more truthful. Some of the most powerful scenes in cinema history come from actors who aren't comfortable with each other. The strain shows up on camera as emotional authenticity. It wasn't the warmth of friendship that made these scenes work. It was the cool tension of two people trying to understand each other across an impossible gap. Their lack of friendship became their greatest gift to the film. Number 12. The movie's themes were so dark that some theaters refused to show it. When A Place in the Sun premiered in 1951, some movie theaters actually refused to show it. The story was considered too sad, too dark, and too morally complex. A young man gets a girl pregnant, then kills her to escape his problems. It was tragedy without redemption, or at least that's how some people saw it. Some theaters thought audiences would leave depressed and upset. Others worried that the story criticized wealth and power too strongly. Religious groups questioned whether the film was moral enough. Studios weren't used to making films this psychologically complicated and this hopeless. The ending didn't provide comfort or justice in the traditional sense. It simply showed the consequences of desire, weakness, and impossible choices. But the film didn't disappear. Instead, it became more famous because people were drawn to its darkness. Audiences discovered something that the worried theater owners didn't understand. People hunger for truth, even when truth is tragic. The controversy actually helped the film find its audience. What some saw as darkness, others saw as honesty. Number 11. Elizabeth Taylor was paid less than the male leads, even though she was already a star. Elizabeth Taylor was already incredibly famous when she joined A Place in the Sun. She had starred in other major films and had millions of fans. Yet she was paid less than Montgomery Clift and less than Raymond Burr, her male co-stars. This was standard Hollywood practice in 1951, but it was also unjust. Taylor's talent was undeniable. Her name could sell tickets. Her face could draw audiences. Yet the studios paid her less simply because she was a woman. The strange part? Taylor accepted this without complaint because that's how the system worked. She didn't have the power to fight back, even though she was one of the most famous actresses alive. This fact reveals something uncomfortable about old Hollywood. Brilliance wasn't rewarded equally, and talent had a different price tag depending on your gender. Looking back now, it seems absurd. But in 1951, it was simply business as usual. The disparity makes us uncomfortable today, but it also shows how far the industry has come. Then again, we still have work to do. Chapter Number 10. The film's cinematography influenced how movies would look for decades. The cinematographer William C. Mellor created a visual style for this film that was groundbreaking. He used shadows and light in ways that filmmakers studied for years afterward. The way he filmed the romantic scenes, soft and dreamy, made audiences feel like they were watching something forbidden and beautiful. The way he filmed the darker scenes, harsh and cold, made viewers feel genuine dread. Mellor understood that cameras don't just record what happens. They create emotion through the way light touches faces, the way shadows fall across rooms, the way darkness swallows hope. Film students began studying his work. Young cinematographers tried to copy his techniques. Directors requested cinematographers who could work like Mellor. His choices in this one film influenced hundreds of movies that came later. The movie taught the film industry something crucial, that visual style is not decoration. It's the actual language of emotion. A camera angle can make a moment tragic or beautiful or terrifying. Mellor proved this so powerfully that his influence still shows up in films made today. One film, one cinematographer, one artistic vision changed how movies would be made forever. Number 9. The script was rewritten 17 times before filming started. Screenwriter Michael Wilson worked on this script for an incredibly long time. He rewrote it 17 times. 17. Each time, He was trying to capture something that kept slipping away. How do you show the invisible interior of a man's mind? How do you make an audience understand his choices, even if they're wrong? Each rewrite was a struggle. The studio wanted one thing, the director wanted another, and the writer wanted the truth. Michael Wilson had to balance entertainment with tragedy, simplicity with complexity, judgment with compassion. Every rewrite meant starting over, finding new ways to express the same emotions. The 17th version was finally right. It worked as entertainment and as art. But those 16 abandoned versions haunted Wilson. They contained ideas and dialogue that were good but not perfect. Good enough wasn't the goal. This obsessive rewriting showed the filmmakers' commitment to quality. It also showed their desperation to make something that mattered. Sometimes art requires that many attempts. Sometimes you have to write the story 17 times before you tell it truly. Number 8. Montgomery Clift's performance was so disturbing that audiences couldn't watch him the same way. After Before. A Place in the Sun, Montgomery Clift was known as a beautiful, romantic actor. He was handsome, sensitive, and appealing. But this film changed how people saw him. His performance as a man capable of terrible choices, a man who wanted to escape his own moral nature, it was so convincing that people became uncomfortable around him. Fans treated him differently. Studio executives began seeing him as troubled rather than beautiful. The intensity he brought to the role followed him into his real life. People whispered about whether some of the darkness in his performance was real darkness in his soul. It wasn't fair, of course. He was acting. But great acting sometimes makes audiences confused about where the performance ends and the person begins. Clift's career shifted after this film. He was offered darker, more complex roles instead of the romantic leads he'd played before. His greatest gift, his ability to show human darkness with truth, had marked him as dangerous in the eyes of Hollywood. What was powerful art became a burden in his personal life. The performance changed more than just his career. It changed how the world saw him as a human being. Number 7. The film almost wasn't made because of the Hollywood Production Code. The Hollywood Production Code was a strict set of rules about what movies could show. It had rules about kissing, rules about suggesting immoral behavior, rules about doubt and darkness. A Place in the Sun almost violated these rules in every scene. A young man impregnates a girl outside of marriage. He considers murder to escape his problems. The wealthy girl he loves offers herself to him without marriage. He is executed at the end without redemption. The censors reviewed the script and were horrified. Debates happened in offices. Arguments erupted about whether this film was even acceptable. But director George Stevens defended every scene. He showed that the film wasn't celebrating immorality. It was showing the consequences of immorality. He proved that the story had moral weight, even if it was dark. After months of negotiation, the censors approved the film, barely. It was one of the first major Hollywood films to push against the production code and win. The film opened a door that other filmmakers would walk through. What looked like censorship almost prevented one of cinema's masterpieces from existing. Courage and art won out against control. Number 6. The famous kiss scene was shot over 47 times. The romantic kiss between Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor became one of the most famous kisses in movie history. But getting that one kiss took 47 attempts. 47. The director wanted to capture something impossible, a moment that felt completely genuine, deeply romantic, yet tinged with the doom of their situation. He wanted the audience to feel the beauty and the tragedy at the same time. The actors tried different angles, different intensity levels, different emotional approaches. Some kisses were too gentle, some were too passionate, some were technically perfect but emotionally empty. Some were emotionally perfect but technically messy. Between takes, they'd step apart, catch their breath, wipe away tears. because by this point they were genuinely moved by their own performance. The 47th take was the one. It had everything: passion, tenderness, desperation, and a strange sadness that made it unforgettable. But nobody knew it was the 47th attempt when they watched the film. They just saw a beautiful, tragic kiss that felt inevitable and heartbreaking. The invisible labor of 46 failed attempts became the magic of one perfect moment. That's the secret of cinema. Beauty requires patience and failure and repetition until it becomes real. Number 5. Shelley Winters' character was based on a real victim from the original murder trial. Shelley Winters played Anne Raymond, the pregnant girl who becomes the victim. Her character was directly inspired by Billy Brown, a real young woman who was killed in the actual Chester Gillette case in 1996. Theodore Dreiser had researched Billy Brown's life, her hopes, her family, her desperation. When Winters prepared for the role, she researched Billy Brown too. She read about a young woman trapped by circumstance, trying to survive, hoping for love and a future. Understanding that she was portraying a real person who had actually died transformed Winters' performance. It became more than acting. It became honoring someone's memory. Every line she spoke, every tear she cried, was for Billy Brown and for all the young women in similar situations. Shelley Winters brought dignity to a victim who had been erased by history. She made audiences care about a woman who had been forgotten. The performance became an act of remembrance. What was fiction on screen was rooted in truth. The character was imagined, but the suffering was real. Winters understood this responsibility and carried it carefully. She turned entertainment into memorial. Number 4. The film was so expensive that the studio almost went bankrupt, making it Paramount Studios invested enormous amounts of money in A Place in the Sun. The cinematography required expensive equipment. The locations cost money. The star salaries were high. The extensive rewrites meant paying writers for months and months. The hundreds of takes meant long shooting schedules. By the standards of 1951, this film was incredibly expensive. Studio executives became nervous. Box office predictions suggested it might not make its money back. The dark story worried business people who wanted entertainment, not tragedy. There were serious conversations about whether Paramount had made a terrible financial mistake. The studio had bet heavily on this film, and if it failed, the company would feel real pain. But something unexpected happened. The film resonated with audiences in a way that nobody predicted. Critics praised it intensely. Word of mouth spread. The dark beauty of the film attracted viewers who were hungry for serious cinema. What started as a financial gamble became a success. The studio's risk paid off. Sometimes artists have to be reckless with money to create something true. Paramount's willingness to spend lavishly on an uncertain vision gave the world a masterpiece. Number 3. The final scene was shot in one take, and nobody expected it to work. The execution scene at the end of the film is extraordinary. Montgomery Clift, who had been acting for months, who had lived inside this character's mind, finally had to face the most important moment, his character's final moments alive. The director decided to shoot it in one take. No retakes. No second chances. Just one performance that would have to be perfect. The entire crew understood the gravity of this choice. If something went wrong, if an actor flubbed a line, if a camera moved wrong, if anything was imperfect, they would have to start over and ask Montgomery Clift to live through this emotional torture again. Nobody wanted that. The pressure was immense. But Clift delivered something that seemed impossible. He moved through that final scene with a kind of spiritual peace. His face showed acceptance, resignation, and a strange kind of dignity. It was the culmination of everything he'd created in this character. When the camera stopped, the entire crew was silent. People had tears on their faces. Clift walked away from the set and disappeared for hours. The one take was perfect. The risk of doing it only once had created something that multiple takes never could have achieved. Sometimes limitation creates perfection. Sometimes you need to remove the safety net to find truth. Number 2. The film inspired a whole new kind of American cinema. A Place in the Sun didn't just entertain audiences. It changed what American cinema could be. Before this film, Hollywood had mostly made either light entertainment or conventional dramas with clear moral lessons. This film showed that American cinema could be sophisticated, tragic, morally complex, and deeply artistic. Directors who watched it realized they could make films that didn't have happy endings. They could create characters who were sympathetic but flawed. They could show consequences without offering easy forgiveness. Young filmmakers studied this film in the years that followed. It gave them permission to be darker, more honest, more willing to show human weakness. The French New Wave directors watched it. American independent filmmakers built on its foundation. Television dramas in the 1950s and 60s learned from its narrative complexity. The ripples from this one film spread through decades of cinema. It opened doors that had been closed. It proved that audiences wanted more than escapism. They wanted truth, even tragic truth. The film didn't just tell a story. It changed the conversation about what stories cinema could tell. One film, made in 1951, influenced the entire future direction of American art. Number 1. The title A Place in the Sun was meant to be ironic. No such place exists. The title itself holds a secret meaning. A Place in the Sun, it sounds warm, hopeful, peaceful, like a sanctuary where someone could finally rest and be happy. But the entire film shows that no such place exists, especially not for the main character. He searches for this place throughout the story. He thinks wealth will provide it. He thinks love will provide it. He thinks escape will provide it. But every choice he makes takes him further from peace. The title is ironic and tragic. It's a promise that the film then systematically shows cannot be kept. The beauty of the title makes the tragedy deeper. We want to believe in a place in the sun for all people, but the film shows that some people, trapped by circumstance, poverty, weakness, and desire, can never find it. The title haunts you after you finish watching. You remember the beautiful words, and you remember the broken character who never found what those words promised. It's the perfect title for a film about human longing and human failure. The words sound like hope. The film shows despair. That contradiction is the entire meaning of cinema itself. Bonus fact, the deleted scene that showed too much. There was a scene filmed for A Place in the Sun that never appeared in the final movie. The scene showed a conversation between Montgomery Clift's character and his mother where he almost confesses what he's done. Almost. The camera would have moved closer and closer to his face as the words formed on his lips, but he couldn't speak them. The scene was extraordinarily powerful. It showed the internal battle of a man trying to tell the truth and failing. Test audiences watched this version, and they became so uncomfortable, so emotionally devastated, that director George Stevens made the difficult decision to remove it. He understood that sometimes showing less creates more power. By cutting the scene, he left an absence, a missing confession that haunts the film more than an actual confession would have. The deleted scene became a ghost haunting the actual film. Filmmakers today rarely cut scenes that are this powerful, but Stevens knew something crucial about human psychology. When you leave something unsaid, the audience's imagination fills the silence with their own pain. The empty space became more moving than any words could have been. It's a reminder that sometimes what you don't show is more important than what you do show. One small choice changed movie history. A Place in the Sun is more than just a movie about crime and punishment. It's a mirror that shows us our own fears and desires. It asks questions that every human being faces. What would we do if we were desperate? How far would we go to escape our circumstances? Is love enough to forgive terrible choices? The film doesn't answer these questions with comfort. Instead, it shows us the weight of consequences, the reality of suffering, and the fact that some damage cannot be undone. The people who made this film understood something beautiful, that cinema is powerful because it allows us to experience other people's lives, to walk in their shoes, to feel their desperation. Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, and George Stevens gave us a gift. They showed us pain with honesty. They didn't make it easy or comfortable, but they made it true. That's the real magic of cinema, the ability to connect human hearts across time, to make us feel less alone in our struggles, and to remind us that our choices matter. If you enjoyed these stories about A Place in the Sun, subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth, and we'll keep uncovering them, one story at a time.